Welcome to Laptop Radio. Today's topic is how blockchain can be used to reinvent real world governance. And we have Eliott Teissonniere with us. He is the chief blockchain architect of Nodle. Hello, Eliott.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. I'm in California. Where are you?
So I'm currently in France, back in Europe because of
Awesome.
current events.
How's the weather there? Is it sunny?
Yeah, very sunny actually. A bit too sunny, getting pretty warm.
What is your story?
Yeah, so I used to be CTO of a company called BitNation. That was actually my first real job. I actually started contributing to the project and quickly graduated to this position of CTO. What BitNation was doing was that we were actually building infrastructure for countries or organizations before DAOs were even invented. So we are working on things like providing identity to people without papers or how to organize votes via blockchain, basically.
Awesome. What is DAO? Which is D-A-O.
Which means decentralized autonomous organization, which is basically a bunch of people getting together and using a bunch of new technologies to take decisions. And whose decisions can be how to allocate funds or how to do certain interactions.
So that's really interesting. When we talk about governance and DAO, how are they related and how is DAO used to create a better governance model?
Yeah, I mean, what I think is pretty interesting in around all these technologies is that there's many companies trying to build DAOs, and all these companies are thinking of new ways to organize themselves. It seems that in our ecosystem, so we're in blockchain and crypto ecosystem, every single company is coming up with a new model, and which is better than any other model to organize and take decisions. Some of them use it as if it was a company, and so my organization is my company, so it's very corporate. I have like one guy that decides everything and a bunch of people supervising. But we also have other teams and projects building something more decentralized. Some are making a democracy-like organization, which is a very interesting way to manage a company. But we also have people actively looking for new ways to organize and to become more efficient. And what's even more interesting is that all those people have different ways to define how efficient they are. So every single model seems to be trying to optimize some kind of efficiency. Like, do I want to be decentralized? Do I want to have lots of control?
So what is the spectrum though? Why do we need decentralization then? I mean, is our current model good enough where we could operate and collaborate in a way so that is our current model efficient enough that we do not need decentralization?
Well, I would say that with the current crisis, we are actually realizing that we are not adapted to solve every single issue with our existing model. There's something very interesting that happened with the coronavirus, actually, which might be a bit unpopular, but it seemed like countries with less democratic ways of handling things were more efficient at dealing with the crisis, which, like Singapore, is definitely not a democracy, and they were extremely efficient. While us, with our little and old democracies, we had lots of freedom, but we were totally inefficient in responding to the crisis.
What is the intentions of governance though? Fundamentally, do we want freedom or do we want efficiency? Or is there a balance in between what our goal and mission really is?
Well, I think that question is up to everybody. Like, maybe you want lots of freedom, and maybe I want something that is extremely efficient, that's not a barrier to innovation. But ultimately, I think it's a balance. People are happy to sacrifice some freedom to get some benefits.
So decentralization is about redistributing power.
Yeah.
And currently, our system is a little bit more centralized, right? And as you said, when we may have less freedom, then there may be more efficiency. But sometimes in democracy, we can have more freedom, but be less efficient, depending on who our leaders are.
Yeah.
So with the redistribution of power, where does that power get distributed to? Like, who are the people?
Yeah, in most cases, it's actually people having money, which is a little and side effect of what we're doing today in blockchain. Like what we do is that we vote with our money. So
Mm-hmm.
it's literally put your money where your mouth is. But also mean that if you have more money, you have more power, which might not be such a good thing, depending on what you're looking for. So yeah, mostly people with enough money. Or in some cases, new projects are coming with new ways to avoid that.
Mm-hmm. But how are they avoiding that though? Sometimes it's good that people with money have power, and sometimes it's really bad that people with money have power because they exclude a certain group of people that probably need help the most, right? So
Exactly.
how do we create a governance system that we distribute power away from not only a group of people, but also a group of wealthy people? But not just away. I mean, is there a way or a governance system where people without money's concerns are addressed and they also have some kind of power? And then wealthy people also have power.
Exactly. And I think that's what we're all trying to find in that ecosystem. We have very pro-decentralization projects that are coming up with new ways to solve that. One of the projects I really like is Polkadot, and what they did
Mm-hmm.
is that they decided to no longer weight votes based on how much money you have,
Mm-hmm.
but rather on how much money you are looking for how long. So even if you don't have lots of, money or however you want to call that, if you decide to put that money aside for some time, you can get more power, you can get more weight inside the balance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's perfect as a system because it's still focusing on your money, which is a downside of using blockchains and being in that ecosystem. But still, it's better than what we came up with until a few months ago. So
What are some projects that are using the technology to define what governance is? Like you spoke about DAOs. Do you see it in real world use cases that are more effective than before? Just a little bit more than experiment in terms of progress.
yeah, I think so. Investment funds were created as a bunch, like decentralized investment funds,
Mhm.
which is crazy. It's a new way to manage money and to invest in projects and back some projects.
Mhm.
A year ago, we had some guy creating what they call the Moloch DAO, and then a bunch of new organizations came up with a similar model. And I think, I feel like it's pretty interesting. Like you have people deciding to invest some money inside a fund, and they can invest any amount of money they want.
Mhm.
And in exchange of that, they get a power and they can decide how the money is used in the hope of maximizing the return, of course.
Mhm. Can you explain or describe the governance model of DAO in detail so that the listeners could better understand it?
Yeah. Every DAO has its own governance model in some way. Let's maybe simplify it. DAO, we have a bunch of people and we gave them some kind of token to vote. So we gave them one unit. Like, so if one is basically you have the power of one, but if you have two, suddenly you have twice more power, etc.
Mhm.
etc. And then all those guys can see a bunch of votes and proposal and they can decide to vote on that.
Mhm.
So that's what would be the skeleton of our organization, which is that I give you one token and I have one token. And we decided to make an organization together. Let's call it something. Yeah, organization something. But
Organization X.
I don't have lots of ideas currently. So we'll stick to organization something. And we decided to use those tokens of power in some way. We decided to say, well, you have one, I have two, for
Mhm.
instance, and I need 2 units of power
Mhm.
to change something, which is very bad for you because you basically don't have any power. But
Because I only have one.
let's stick to my example. And suddenly that's what we can start calling a model because we define some parameters. We
Mhm.
defined I need 2 units of power. I mean, I basically need 2/3 of the power
Mhm.
to trigger a proposal. We say we execute it. So that can be allocating money to you or to me or to the laptop radio show, for instance. Maybe you decide to come up, you make a proposal and we decide to vote. And when we vote, we apply those parameters and we then take decisions. And what I would call the governance model is basically all those kinds of parameters. How much power you have, how much do I have power? How much power do I need to do action XYZ?
Okay, so basically we have formed a company called Organization Anything, and you have 2 units of power, and I have 1 unit of power. Say we need to establish a bank account and say you like Wells Fargo and I like B of A, Bank of America. We have to vote. When we vote, we might go with Wells Fargo because you have...
Exactly. So it means that this model is flawed,
yeah,
and that we need to change it. So what if suddenly we decide to allocate more power to you or to someone else?
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what we can do with this kind of technologies. Almost liquid. Based on your feedback, we realize that this model doesn't work. Like, I basically have the power to do anything and you can't do anything. That doesn't make sense and that doesn't seem to be justified.
For example, if there's Alice and Bob who really like Organization Anything and wanted to join us, Alice and Bob said, hey, we would love to join your DAO and we want some power. So I guess they can join us. How many coins or tokens would you give them? And
it's up to us as an organization to decide how much we allocate them. And it can be matching their investment, or it can be out of their own, goodwill. And maybe I'm generous and I decide to give Alice and Bob, both would have 1 power. So they would have the same share value inside the organization.
okay.
And suddenly we end up in a system where we basically have 5 total units of power. I have 2 and you guys have 3 together. So if you guys get together and decide to say, well, I no longer want to have Eliott inside the organization, technically you could.
If Alice and Bob and I are against you and we want to vote you out and we voted you out, what happens then? Like, is there any check and balances? How do we prevent bad things from happening to a company that are bad judgment or bad decision?
Yeah, well, that's where we could write inside our organization different exceptions to different rules. I believe business-centric world, we will call that bylaws or whatever you want to call that. But we will basically have certain actions that would require different amount of power. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's say basically I have more power. So, I'm whatever inside the organization. But let's say that you vote somebody out, we switch that parameter to 4 power being needed. Mm-hmm. So you can do anything you want, even if you have 3 amounts of power. So if you guys get together, you can allocate funds, you can spend money. But for that specific action, which is to vote myself out, I have changed the parameter to require 4 out of 5 votes. Mm-hmm. I know that's a tool that we have to decide to enforce some very specific checks on what's going on.
For a governance model to work, who decides these checks? Should they be decided at the beginning when the organization is formed, or can they be changed over time? And once they're changed, are certain votes required? Because it really doesn't make sense if we voted you out, but you changed that day to 4 votes. I mean, then nothing could be done.
Obviously, these parameters can be changed. And usually they are started, the initial, let's say, creators of the organizations who choose them themselves. So at the beginning, we had decided to do 2 tokens for me, 2 powers for me and 1 power for you. And we decided that we needed 2 powers to do anything. Mm-hmm. And when we added Alice and Bob, we changed those parameters. We gave Alice and Power 1 power each. And since I was very scared of you guys voting me out, I decided to change that specific action to require 4 amounts of power. Mm-hmm. Because, I want to keep a very tight control on that organization. It's a fancy name. So yeah, parameters will be chosen at the beginning and we will be able to change them as we want, as long as we respect the rules inside the organization.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the best rules that you see that enabled a really well-run governance?
Well, typically we would require a certain percentage of votes. So instead of saying we need 4 out of 5 power, I would say we need 20% of power. And in most cases, blockchain ecosystem, the best parameters that we use is usually a third of the organization plus one.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason behind that is because in most cases, most people are not going to vote for anything, which is also the case actually in countries and existing organizations. Many people actually don't go and vote.
Why?
Well, because they're busy, because they don't want to. Everybody will find a reason to not vote potentially. If we are using blockchains, voting on something costs you money because you have to pay for transaction fees and extra and do the required work. So sometimes you just don't care and don't want to spend money to vote on that thing, which is fine. So in a large scale organization with thousands of people, we will typically do a third plus one vote. In smaller scale organizations, maybe it's a group of friends, we are 10 people and we decide to do something. In that case, we will do 50% plus one. Because we all know each other, we're all going to vote and we all care about what's going on, but we don't want a minority to decide for everybody. So we do the famous, 50% plus one to make sure it's a majority.
Okay. And what is the transparency of voting though?
Yeah.
Blockchain basically makes your vote have that accountability because you can't change it. That vote becomes really important and because you pay for your fees. So
Exactly.
I think you care about it more. It has more weight, right? Because, hey, I'm paying for my vote and it counts. And once you vote, you can't really change it. How does that transparency influence governance?
Yeah, I mean, it's simple. On a blockchain, everything is public. So if you decided to turn very bad, everybody could see it. And what if they decide to vote you out because you were a bad actor? So everything is public, and that's how, we handle any case of corruption or anything else. What if suddenly we can see that I wired you a huge amount of money so that you vote for me? Well, if I did so on the same network and using the same technologies, you would be discovered potentially. And we, as a community, may decide to take an action against you as a punishment. So, I think there's a downside to that, which is not that we cannot corrupt people. It's actually that votes being public means that past votes can influence future votes. Because if I see a candidate that's winning and I just want to join the majority because I don't want to be seen as an outcast, I would actually vote for the guy that's already winning, which is a human bias. Like, it's a thing. If you see 10 people on one side and 2 people on the other side, you would naturally go with the 10 people.
And then there's also, of course, with that is like shaming and the chance that that person could be influenced, right? Like if you know that I vote no, but you want me to vote yes next time, you might, some reason, social engineer and talk to me and get me to vote yes.
Yeah. And, that's what presidential programs are actually for, making people change their minds. So besides that, we are not yet doomed with this kind of technologies. Obviously, we came up with ways to fix that. So for instance, now most votes will happen in 2 times. People would vote, but they will give you a sealed envelope when they vote. I mean, the digital equivalent of a sealed envelope. And at some point in time, they will decide to open it. And so we will say they reveal their votes. And in that case, nobody can see the votes in advance, so nobody can be influenced. And then later we actually reveal the votes and execute them. Awesome. So we have ways to solve it, but we need to be conscious of the issues.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think if the vote is in a digital envelope and it gets open later, then, and it's somewhat anonymous.
Yeah.
That is a little bit better for governance.
Exactly. We basically have all these new tools that we can use to be more efficient at what we do. But, like I can make anonymous and confidential votes publicly.
Yeah, that's awesome. How are people using governance in DAOs today? I mean, do you think that DAO organizations will be more preferred in the future?
Well, we're already seeing some organizations that in some ways are more efficient than traditional organizations. So, I don't know if you're familiar with a project called Uniswap in the blockchain ecosystem, where they recently announced that they would issue a governance token and that they would let people control their network.
Mm-hmm.
And Uniswap is like ways more successful as a currency exchange than most existing and traditional exchanges.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it attracted what, 2 billion, $20 billion
Mm-hmm.
in transactions in the past, what, 6 months,
Yeah.
8 months maximum, which is crazy. Like, no existing company would be able to pretend doing that
Yeah.
today. I mean, not as I know of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Strange.
so, it seems like some organizations are actually being efficient, but also better performing using those kind of new tools,
Mm-hmm.
um, or being in that ecosystem, which comes with each other.
Just really going back to governance
Yeah.
system, we have democracy, we have a few people making decisions, and with DAOs, people with different tokens making decisions. Which one do you think is the most efficient or better, though? Do you think that it matters? Do you think that even with tokenization of governance, we can still have democracy where there's still certain freedom, and at the same time balance that with decision making?
Yeah, I think so. I actually worked on a project that we used to call a united basic income back in the times.
Mm-hmm.
And what we wanted to do would be to give everyone one token, which would be, you are one person, so you can vote as one person. And we will be able to do different things with that. We will be able to, the initial idea was to give you food and water, but we will also be able to have you vote as in a democracy and, decide to choose your next leader or whatever. And it seemed to work. So I guess it will be adaptable to our existing
And
system.
since you're a chief blockchain architect, what kind of technology solutions or tools should people think about when they are thinking about governance?
Yeah, there's one tool that I really like. I used to endorse it, but let's say that I don't endorse it to avoid, use. So I used to be a big fan of a tool called Aragon.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a small Spain startup, whatever. And they actually made something they called DAOs as a service, which will let anybody create their own organization.
Mm-hmm.
And, like run it as if it was some kind of virtual company somewhere in some country. So that's actually what I did with some friends. Like we ended up running some of our first companies through these tools
Mm-hmm.
and deciding how to pay each other's salaries, how to use our funds, what product to buy. We would use this only tool to manage all of that.
How does that work? So you and your friends organized a DAO.
Yeah.
Like where? Like in Estonia? Like how does that work and how
I
do you
love
break it down
Estonia, so don't get me
salary?
started. No, it's like it was basically only running on a blockchain. So it was not in any single country. It was just a bunch of tools and cryptocurrencies being used around and being managed through those same tools. And what we ended up doing was that we talked to people in Wyoming.
Mhm.
And what the Wyoming announced a few months later would be that they would let anybody with a cryptocurrency address, such as a decentralized organization,
Mhm.
open a similar company inside the Wyoming.
Mhm.
And so it would let anybody, with an organization like ours that we used to create with my friends, incorporate our company in the legal world and be able to take whatever investments from different people and traditional investors. So even if it still runs, on some kind of nerdy blockchain and cryptocurrency thing that 10% of the people understands, which is
We're,
sad because we can improve here a
yeah, we're
lot.
getting there. Yeah, that's why I asked you really basic questions sometimes. And because I mean my show talks about bleeding edge technology, but I just want to make sure that people also follow.
Exactly. So
Um,
that's why I've been trying to speak of power and like units of power.
which is awesome because I think we're talking a lot about things that are happening right now, but it's probably going to be more prominent in the future.
Yeah.
Even though there might be 10% of people who understands these things, I think that percentage will grow over time. And I was just looking at the market size of blockchain and global blockchain devices. The market is generating 300 million in revenue in 2019 and is forecasted to reach 23.5 billion. Look at that data there, 300 million in 2019 to 23.5 billion by 2030. 2030 is really in 10 years. And this is talking about the global blockchain devices. So I think we're in the fastest growing market right now, which is probably around 50% grown rate. That's why it's kind of awesome to talk about governance. And in my opinion, I think it's kind of important that for a redistribution of power, that each project has their own governance model so that to avoid corruption, to avoid things that don't work, and population control. I mean, when I say population control, I think Bitcoin doesn't have that really, because anyone could buy Bitcoin and that person who owns a lot of Bitcoin basically controls that power, right?
Yeah.
I call that population control. I don't know if we know what the formal name of it is, right? It is decentralized, but because one person could buy everything, it has that concentration of power still. So I'm hoping that with other companies that are more decentralized, and when they think about governance, not only do they think about the voting power and the different powers that come with a token, but also how much could people own it so that it avoids the concentration of power. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that's exactly what we've been trying to do at Nodle. So we actually have a totally not decentralized governance model currently, where we reproduced a corporate structure and then, want to keep some of our power once we open the network to keep, being able to run it at least for some time. And you have actually many projects doing exactly that. In most cases, all those new shiny organizations going out actually pre-allocate them like a third of the voting power, along with their investors and employees. And that's a way for them to keep some kind of ownership over what they did without having it go sidelines too quickly.
Okay, what is Nodle? And again, how does that governance work practically between you and I? Say, I'm part of Nodle, just an example. How does that work?
Yeah, so we are not a governance company. We're actually an IoT network, and we try to connect things in a decentralized way. So we have a network that spreads over the web, and like with nodes collecting data and pushing that back in the network, and being compensated for that. But for instance, we could have a system where we decide that you could control some of the funds, and we will give you some kind of voting power over how we actually allocate some of our funds.
Awesome.
In our case, so we ended up doing 3 separate committees, I think. So we ended up having a group of people that can collect funds and manage them. So it's basically a financial team.
Awesome.
And we ended up, having 2 other groups of people, one of them being technical and being able to change the network and being able, to change its parameters as we saw before. And, one last one that basically supervises everything and can veto decisions.
I think it's awesome in a way, because I feel like with the new governance system that is created that is part of the blockchain ecosystem, it gives voting powers and different kinds of rights to participants. And these participants, if I'm part of that group, can contribute or participate in the decision making.
And that's extremely powerful, because especially in blockchain, most of our users are actually also your investors indirectly, because they buy your token, they buy what's needed to use your product, because you have to pay fees extra. So it would be justified to give them back some kind of control, because they're actually giving you money all the times. Every time they use your product, you actually win huge amounts of money. And what I also find pretty interesting is that through those schemes, of giving power back to our users and community, we're actually ending up making products that are actually targeted at our users, and no longer being a nice product to attract plenty of users and then resell all the data later. If you give your community the power to vote over what you do and basically how you get paid when doing it, you end up serving your community and not trying to serve your data buyers or data clients.
Yeah. I mean, which is a really good shift, because just to paraphrase, we're saying that when you're serving your community and giving the power back to your community, instead of the people who pay for your ads or the people who pay for your data, it feels better. And it's actually more business model.
Yeah. and what it shows is that, these projects are now making millions of dollars. So it is a sustainable business model, or at least some people manage to pull it off. So it's not only a dream of 10 people in their garage. It's actually working and generating lots of money.
Yeah, and of course, this is something that has been applied. It's just not something that you just made it up, right? I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, I think a lot of companies now have a different business model where they have investors and the investors buy their stock, and then they might have preferred shares, or and that with the preferred shares comes with certain voting powers, and the company basically focuses on gathering data and selling data, is selling your data, the user's data, and they make money out of that. You basically make money if you buy their shares, but it's not inclusive, and the focus is really different with this new way of looking at governance, and especially governance in blockchain company. And the company could be anything. It doesn't have to be a governance company. I think each project should have a governance layer, just to be technical, with different parameters and different factors that look at serving the community and giving the community that power so that they can have a voice.
Exactly. It will be like if you buy an iPhone, Apple give you some kind of decision on how they're going to update it next year, so
Mm-hmm.
that you don't get disappointed in a year, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty cool because, like, I think with some of the money that I spend on Google products, for example, I'll be lucky if they actually call me back after they charge me. But this is really going beyond a step further, is that not only are they serving me, they're also giving me a vote on their decision making. And the company will decide, after looking at all the surveys and the vote, how to move forward, but I would have a voice.
Exactly. And actually, you'll be incentivized to stick to them. You'll be better clients to them because they actually gave you something back and they gave you the power to change what you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that helps you, retain your customers too, because some of your customers are involved. It's also something they made in some way.
Mm-hmm.
They decided what was going to be the next product.
Do you think people are ready to have that kind of responsibility? Sometimes I think in this age, we basically need an app to cook for us, to drive us to places, to do whatever, X, anything for us. And then here you're talking about giving us and giving me the power to vote and actually care about something. Do you think that we as a world are really ready for that kind of responsibility? I mean, like, even when we're talking about blockchain, I need to take care of my private key. Okay.
Which is ridiculous. Like, there is so much friction to use this kind of tools that I honestly want to give up most of the times. Like, I used to try and set up a bunch of tools and things to stuff with tokens, and it's a mess. I mean, it's very tricky to manage. Back to your original question, I would say it depends on people, which is a bit naive, but some people will care and some won't. And if they don't, well, it's fine. You're not going to vote anyway, so keep your stuff.
People do vote though, right?
Most of them would, and
Yeah.
some of them won't. Just as we do today, like when you run an election, since I think, in America, we're going to have some elections soon.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Sometimes, some people don't go and vote, and it's their choice. And I think we will end up having something similar where maybe you don't want to vote for what's going to be the next iPhone, but maybe you want to go and vote for what's going to be the next Google Suite tool or whatever.
I'll be happy to vote for a changing color of a
Oh yeah,
product.
I
Maybe
would.
if I don't want like a pink phone, but I want like a berry phone.
And
Something
what
silly like that is probably important to me.
exactly? And what if you end up actually making money from having voted for a decision? What if Apple will reward you for choosing the winning decision or whatever? Suddenly you will be incentivized to go and vote.
So what you said is really important. Basically, you're saying that if I think that, say I voted for a berry phone, and for some weird reasons, the majority of the other voters agree with me and wanted to try a berry looking phone, and that berry phone sold out. It became a trend and people love it.
Exactly.
So Apple would basically incentivize me or pay me through tokens or coins because
Exactly.
I let a decision that makes the company money.
they made a huge amount of money by selling your very iPhone, So you actually help them come up with that decision. So it will be justified to compensate you for that. Even if it's like $2. If it's $2 on every single decision you make, it's actually a huge amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll be happy with like 2 cents if
Yeah,
depending on the amount of money they have, right? So if for every dollar that they make, they give me 1 or 2 cents, I would be happy with that.
that's not bad. Right?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. And then I'll be more incentivized to give them more ideas and they can own the IP. But
Exactly. And what end up is that because you actually chose the berry color for the iPhone, I bet you that you're actually going to go and buy the iPhone, the berry iPhone.
of course.
So, like they're winning everywhere and you are winning everywhere too. Because since you booked the new iPhone, you're also getting a nice reward in the form of more power too.
Hmm.
So, everybody starts winning together.
Yeah.
All these kind of new models, which is pretty interesting for our world. Like, it's no longer people losing money or having their data or whatever exploited, it's people working with the companies to make more money and to have better products.
So in the traditional stock world, we have shareholders meeting.
Yeah.
And we also have disclosures where they get little books describing the project, how many stock the founders or the people are owning, what are some of the risks. How does that look like in the decentralized world?
It's actually pretty similar, I would say. So we end up having monthly governance calls for some projects. Like I think MakerDAO is doing that. So every week or every month, you can join their Zoom meeting or whatever, and listen and participate in the debates. And then at the end of the meeting, you have a bunch of proposals being written on the wall or like on a stone or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then people, go and vote for it until, the next month or the next week.
Awesome.
So it's a bit more as asynchronous, I would say, like if you do a board meeting tomorrow, you will end up having with 10, 20 people around the table and they will then hopefully come up with a decision at the end of the meeting. If not, you will do a vote later and you will talk again extra. Well, we basically do the same thing.
Awesome. And is there anything else that you wanted to cover that I have not asked you?
No, I think you did. You asked good questions. So we covered, lots of ground.
Awesome. Awesome. And what is that one advice that you would like to share with the community?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from a crypto and blockchain world, so obviously it's going to be focused on that thing. But in most cases, when people think of crypto and blockchain, they think of money.
Mm-hmm.
And they think of, I'm going to buy a bunch of Bitcoins, wait 2 years, and I'm going to be very rich,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably not the case, by the way, but, whatever. Well, I think people should look a bit deeper and think of other uses of that technology.
Mm-hmm.
So today we talked of governance, but we could also have talked of decentralized finance, which is coming. If we talked about AI, we could talk about AI for cars, but we could also talk about AI for flying planes or dating or name it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think people should think of crypto not only as a new financial tool, but as a new technology,
Mm-hmm.
and they can build ways more things on top of that. And we're only starting.
So Eliott, where do people learn about governance and where can they go? I mean, because I feel like governance is an important topic, just really dear to my heart because it prevents a lot of internal conflict, right? Because I think the number one reason, or one of the number one reason that a lot of startups fail, a lot of companies fail, is because of internal conflict. Even after that succeed, it's really the governance that runs the company.
Yeah,
So where do
exactly.
people go and learn about governance and blockchain? It seems so,
Tricky.
like, yeah, like
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
important.
And today that's actually the case. Like you don't really have a single resource. There's not a single website where you can go and like read 5 hours on that and end up learning so many things,
Mhm.
I mean, personally, that's one of my side projects that I'm trying to solve, but I will not push it here out of respect for you, I think. But, well, okay. Well, I actually created something that I call the Governance Research Institute.
Okay.
And what I ended up trying to do is making a wiki
Mhm.
where people can simply, go there and say, Well, today I want to learn about how Polkadot is running.
Mm-hmm.
So, I click on the link and learn about Polkadot. So, yeah, I mean, probably advice to go and look for this kind of resources. And there's many others, like there's a few good ones from the guys at Aragon, which I'm a big fan of, but what do you say
And
that?
yeah, and that's Aragon. And Polkadot is Polkadot.
And actually, Polkadot has a very good wiki.
Mm-hmm.
Their wiki is excellent as in explaining many things about blockchain and how they actually run the network. And in my opinion, it's like a model, of how we should explain what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually have a very interesting page on governance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah. Yeah.
the starting point.
Yeah, and I think it's important to really reach out to different projects and ask them about their pros and cons of how their governance works. Because I think with blockchain technology, a lot of that could be toggled and created by the organization of the project, depending on what the governance is for and what type of technology it is for. It could change and it could adapt to that technology. So it shouldn't be a copy. It should be tailored toward the project.
Yeah, you got it. And what's amazing with this kind of projects too is that once you have learned about it, you can also participate and experiment it. It's not only a theoretical thing you'll read on the internet or in books, like you could actually jump in and decide to vote for things.
Yeah, and join a few communities so that you can test it out. Where can people find you, Eliott?
On Twitter?
What is your Twitter? What is your Twitter account?
It's Eliott Tess, Eliott, and then Teiss.
Okay, awesome.
It's very complex. Yeah. And I'm trying to be a bit more involved in the blockchain ecosystem. So I'm making that governance thing and probably new things very soon too.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to see that progress, and hopefully you'll come back after it's created and talk a little bit about progress like a year or two later. I think that would be super awesome.
Sure.
Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's fun, and I think it's important that we start thinking about these things early.
Yeah, definitely. Bye bye.
Bye bye.